It was a bright afternoon in the city, with the sun casting long shadows across the sidewalk and the hum of traffic filling the streets. People moved quickly, lost in their own thoughts, some talking on phones, others hurrying to meet friends or return to work. Among them, one man walked quietly, almost unnoticed. He moved with a calm, steady pace, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket, his eyes scanning the world with careful attention. There was something gentle about the way he walked, a quiet presence that somehow made him blend into the background. On the same street, a police officer was making his usual rounds. He had been on duty since early morning, and the tension from the day had already started to weigh on him. Every sound seemed louder, every movement sharper. He had seen too many conflicts, too many people acting aggressively, and it made him wary, almost paranoid. As he walked, his eyes scanned the crowd, seeking anything that seemed out of place. When the officer saw the quiet man, something about him caught the officer's attention. The man was not doing anything wrong, but his stillness seemed strange. He didn't rush, didn't speak loudly, didn't draw attention. The officer, however, misread the calmness as something suspicious. His mind, clouded by fatigue and past encounters, imagined a threat where there was none. The quiet man, in truth, had done nothing at all to provoke anyone. The street was busy. Vendors were calling out the names of their goods. The smell of food wafted from nearby carts, and the chatter of pedestrians created a constant background noise. Yet in the middle of this normal city rhythm, tension was about to rise. The officer, his nerves frayed, approached the man without much thought. He raised his hand and struck, a sudden and shocking act that made the quiet man stumble slightly. The sound of the baton hitting the man echoed faintly against the buildings, drawing the attention of people nearby. Passers-by froze, some dropping their groceries, others stepping back in shock. Their eyes widened, mouths opening as they processed what had just happened. The quiet man steadied himself, his body swaying slightly but not falling. He looked at the officer calmly, almost as if trying to understand why such violence had come from a person who was supposed to protect the public. He did not shout or fight back. He simply held himself steady, a figure of calm amid sudden chaos. A few brave onlookers stepped forward, their voices rising in protest. "Why did you hit him?" one shouted. Another pulled out a phone, starting to record the incident, their hands trembling slightly. The city had become an unwilling audience to a moment that felt both unreal and terrifying. People around whispered to each other, speculating about what had happened, their voices mixing with the noise of traffic and distant sirens. The officer, meanwhile, was frozen in the moment. His confidence faltered as he realized that people were watching. He had acted without thinking, guided only by a rush of fear and assumptions. His eyes darted to the quiet man again, now seeing the face that had been hidden in plain sight. There was no anger, no challenge, only a calm that made the officer uneasy. It was a calm he couldn't easily read, a presence that seemed to demand a pause, a moment to reconsider what he had done. The quiet man straightened his jacket and adjusted his stance, his voice finally breaking the tense silence. It was soft but firm, carrying authority without aggression. People turned their heads to listen, their attention captured by this strange mix of gentleness and strength. "Please step back," he said, not to threaten but to create space, to allow reason to return to the moment. The officer hesitated, his baton lowering slightly, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend the scene. Witnesses murmured among themselves, some pointing fingers, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Children watched from a distance, their small faces reflecting confusion and fear. It was a moment that no one on the sidewalk would forget, a sudden collision of authority and innocence, of fear and calm. The quiet man, despite the strike, did not react with anger. Instead, he seemed to understand something deeper about the city, about the people around him, and about the officer who had acted so rashly. The sound of approaching footsteps added another layer to the tension. Pedestrians stopped to see who was coming, their curiosity piqued. Some tried to intervene, their voices joining the chorus of questions directed at the officer. "Why did you do that?" they demanded. Others shook their heads silently, recording on their phones as if to make sure the world would know what had happened. The city itself seemed to pause, the usual rush slowed by the sudden drama unfolding in the middle of the sidewalk. The officer's face turned pale, a mix of fear and realization washing over him. He had hit someone, yes, but he could not yet see who this person truly was. His mind raced, imagining the worst and hoping perhaps that no one would recognize the man. Yet in the growing crowd, recognition was inevitable. People were whispering names, glancing at one another, and slowly connecting the dots. The quiet man who had walked unnoticed moments before was someone of significance, someone whose presence carried weight beyond the ordinary day-to-day chaos. As the officer's adrenaline began to fade slightly, replaced by the creeping realization of potential consequences, the quiet man remained composed. He adjusted his position on the sidewalk, avoiding eye contact with the officer but keeping his own eyes open to the surroundings. The calmness in his posture contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from the officer, highlighting the imbalance between thoughtless aggression and quiet dignity. The crowd, sensing the officer's hesitation, grew bolder. They moved closer, still keeping a safe distance, demanding answers and demanding respect for the man who had been struck. Some tried to calm the situation, speaking gently to the officer, while others continued to document the moment, knowing that this scene could change everything for those involved. The quiet man, meanwhile, remained silent in many ways, his presence alone speaking volumes to everyone who watched. People around began to murmur about the character of the man who had been struck. There was something in his eyes, something in the way he stood despite the sudden strike, that conveyed strength without violence. It was unusual, inspiring even, and it made the onlookers more protective, more aware that the officer's action had crossed a line that could not be ignored. Time seemed to stretch as the moment held, the city noise fading into the background for those closest to the incident. The strike, brief as it had been, became a turning point, a point of tension that could either escalate or resolve depending on the next actions taken. The officer, now aware that every eye was upon him, felt a sinking realization that this was no ordinary citizen he had struck. The quiet man had an aura that suggested authority, experience, and recognition, though no one yet spoke of exactly who he was. The quiet man finally spoke again, his voice calm but insistent. He asked the officer to lower his baton fully and step back. He did not shout or threaten. His words carried a weight that demanded attention without aggression. The officer, now beginning to understand the seriousness of his mistake, complied slowly, each movement hesitant, as if testing the reality of the situation. The people watching held their breath, sensing the tension could erupt at any moment. In those moments, the quiet man became more than just a pedestrian. He became a figure of calm authority in the middle of chaos. His demeanor, unshaken by the sudden strike, drew admiration and curiosity from the crowd. People began to whisper again, questioning what they had just witnessed and wondering about the man who had remained so composed, despite the aggression directed at him. The officer's mind raced as he tried to anticipate the consequences. His hand lowered, his stance softened, but the fear and tension remained. He glanced at the crowd, noting the recording phones and the whispers. It was clear that the moment would not be forgotten quickly, that witnesses would carry their versions of the story beyond the streets of the city. He realized slowly that he had misjudged the situation entirely, and that the quiet man had done nothing to provoke such force. The quiet man continued to stand there, calm and collected, not pressing the officer but also not backing down. He created a space where reason could return, where the situation could be de-escalated without further harm. The crowd around them, sensing the shift, began to relax slightly, though the tension in the air remained thick. The incident had captured their full attention, transforming an ordinary sidewalk into a stage where human dignity and authority collided. Finally, the quiet man stepped slightly to the side, signaling that the moment was over if handled correctly. The officer, now fully aware of the eyes upon him and the potential fallout, lowered his baton completely and took a deep breath. The scene, once charged with fear and sudden violence, began to settle into a strange, uneasy calm. The people watching knew they had witnessed something remarkable, even if they didn't yet understand the full story. The quiet man had shown strength without aggression, presence without conflict, and in doing so had held the attention of everyone around him, turning a sudden strike into a lesson in composure and human dignity. The moment the crowd began to murmur, the realization spread like wildfire. The quiet man who had been struck was not just any pedestrian. One person in the crowd gasped, pointing and whispered a name that instantly caught everyone's attention. Others looked closer, their eyes widening in disbelief. The man they had all assumed was ordinary was actually the mayor of the city. The street, which had moments ago been full of the usual bustle, froze in sudden recognition. The people around felt shock ripple through them, a mix of surprise and anger. The officer, who had acted so hastily, suddenly felt a cold wave of fear. His face paled and his hand dropped from the baton as he realized the truth. He had hit the city's highest authority, someone respected and recognized by every citizen around him. The implications of his action dawned on him almost immediately. His earlier confidence vanished, replaced by a sinking dread. The whispers from the crowd turned into voices raised in astonishment and protest, some expressing disbelief, others outrage. The mayor, despite the strike, maintained his calm demeanor. He adjusted his jacket slightly, brushed off the motion with quiet composure, and spoke in a voice that carried authority but not anger. He addressed the officer without raising his voice, his words measured and clear. The calmness in his tone contrasted sharply with the tension in the air. People nearby noticed the composure and felt a strange sense of respect and admiration. Even the officer, caught in his mistake, could not help but notice the mayor's ability to command the situation without aggression. As the realization sank into the crowd, someone recorded the interaction on their phone, capturing the entire sequence of events. The recordings would later circulate, showing not only the officer's mistake but also the mayor's poise in response. People started sharing the videos with others, spreading the news quickly. Within minutes, the street felt different, the energy charged with the knowledge of what had just happened. Pedestrians stopped in their tracks, some whispering to friends, others calling out to strangers to confirm what they were seeing. The officer tried to speak, to explain, but his words came out stammered and confused. His attempts at justification only made him appear more flustered. The realization of his error weighed heavily on him, and the presence of so many witnesses made it impossible to recover his composure quickly. Every glance from the crowd felt like a judgment. Some people moved closer, wanting to get a better view, while others stood back, unsure how to react to the surprising revelation. The mayor, sensing the rising tension, took a few steps forward, creating a small space between himself and the officer. He did not shout, did not demand immediate apology, but his presence commanded attention. He acknowledged the people around him, his voice gentle yet authoritative, asking them to remain calm. His ability to manage the situation without escalating it was remarkable. Even in the midst of sudden violence, he had created a sense of order, showing the public that he could handle adversity with dignity. People began talking among themselves, sharing what they had seen and trying to process the moment. The shock of seeing the mayor struck by a police officer created a mixture of fear, anger, and curiosity. Witnesses wondered how such an incident could happen in the middle of a busy city street, and some started expressing concern over the officer's judgment. There was a collective sense that the event was not only surprising, but also serious, carrying implications that went far beyond the street itself. The officer, now aware of the attention and the stakes, tried to maintain composure but struggled. His movements were stiff, his eyes darting nervously between the mayor and the growing crowd. He realized that he could not hide what had happened. The mayor, on the other hand, remained calm and composed, responding to the situation with measured words and small gestures that encouraged the crowd to focus on order rather than chaos. Nearby shopkeepers and pedestrians watched intently. Some had come out of their shops to see what the commotion was about. They whispered among themselves, exchanging bits of information and expressing disbelief that the man who had been struck was indeed the mayor. Children on the sidewalk looked on, some clinging to their parents, sensing the tension in the air but not fully understanding the significance of the incident. Their wide eyes mirrored the astonishment of adults, creating a surreal scene of shock and curiosity. The mayor took a few slow steps to acknowledge those around him. He made brief eye contact with several witnesses, silently conveying reassurance and calm. He spoke again to the officer, this time asking for clarity and ensuring that no further harm would come. The crowd sensed the change in tone, a shift from immediate fear and tension to cautious attention and respect for the mayor's handling of the situation. It was a moment that transformed the scene, making the mayor appear not just as a victim of a mistake, but as a leader capable of navigating unexpected challenges. The officer's mind raced. He tried to recall the training, the protocols, and the expectations, realizing that he had failed in every way. His fear was not just about being struck down or punished, but about the public scrutiny and the realization that the man he had hit had influence, authority, and respect throughout the city. The weight of the mistake pressed down on him, and he struggled to find the words to explain himself, knowing that any explanation might fall short. Meanwhile, the crowd's focus shifted. They began to recognize the bravery and calm of the mayor. People whispered to each other, commenting on his composure and ability to manage the situation. Social media posts began circulating as bystanders uploaded videos, capturing both the strike and the mayor's reaction. Comments poured in, praising his behavior and criticizing the officer's actions. The quiet man had suddenly become the center of attention, not because of aggression, but because of his ability to respond with dignity. The mayor glanced around, acknowledging the concern and fear in the crowd. He asked for a moment of order, encouraging those present to step back and allow for a proper resolution. His words were firm yet gentle, and people immediately complied. The atmosphere, once charged with shock and fear, began to settle slightly, though tension still lingered. The mayor's actions demonstrated a rare combination of authority and empathy, a reminder that strength does not always come from aggression. The officer, now fully aware of the consequences, lowered his eyes and took a step back. His posture reflected both fear and regret. He realized that he had acted rashly, allowing assumptions and stress to dictate his behavior. The mayor, seeing this, did not mock or reprimand him in the moment. Instead, he maintained control, showing that leadership sometimes requires patience and understanding, even in the face of mistakes. People around began recording more carefully, wanting to capture the entire scene, not just the initial act. They exchanged glances and whispered, knowing that this moment would not be forgotten. The street had become more than a sidewalk. It had become a stage where authority, mistake, and calm dignity intersected. Each person watching could feel the weight of the situation, and many began to realize how unusual it was for someone to respond to violence with such poise. The mayor took a few steps closer to the officer, not to intimidate, but to engage. His movements were deliberate, his body language calm yet assertive. He spoke again, asking the officer to acknowledge the mistake and to ensure that nothing further would escalate. The crowd sensed the shift, feeling that resolution was possible without conflict. The scene charged with tension moments ago began to transform into one of cautious respect and awareness. As the situation continued, people started sharing their observations. They spoke about the quiet strength of the mayor, the fear and hesitation of the officer, and the role of the witnesses who had stepped forward. Each person had their own interpretation, but everyone agreed that the moment was remarkable. The mayor's ability to remain composed under sudden and unjustified attack had turned a potentially explosive situation into a moment of reflection and calm. Slowly, the officer moved aside, no longer holding his baton in a threatening manner. The mayor maintained his calm stance, ensuring that the public could see the importance of measured response. Witnesses continued recording, whispering among themselves and sharing the scene with others around them. The energy of the street had shifted, no longer dominated by fear, but by recognition of both authority and human dignity. By the end of the encounter, the quiet man had fully revealed his presence and authority without raising his voice or resorting to violence. He had handled a dangerous moment with composure, transforming the reactions of those around him and turning a random strike into a demonstration of calm leadership. The officer, though shaken, began to understand the seriousness of his mistake, aware that the events of that afternoon would resonate far beyond the city sidewalk where it all began. The crowd slowly dispersed, carrying with them the memory of a moment when a quiet man struck by force revealed the strength that comes from calm, dignity, and human presence. The news of what had happened on the sidewalk spread rapidly. Within minutes, people who had not been present on the street were calling friends, texting colleagues, and sharing videos online. Social media platforms were soon flooded with the recording captured by witnesses, showing the officer striking the quiet man and the calm, commanding reaction that followed. The video was clear, and the comments underneath reflected a mixture of shock, outrage, and admiration. Many praised the man's dignity, not knowing he was the mayor, while others speculated about his identity. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story, broadcasting the footage and providing commentary that captured the public's attention. Inside the mayor's office, the phone rang constantly. Staffers were working quickly to manage the situation, coordinating with security, preparing statements, and ensuring that the mayor was safe. Despite the chaos, the mayor remained composed, moving with calm precision and speaking in a voice that reassured both his team and the public. His focus was on ensuring the situation would be handled correctly, without unnecessary escalation or fear. He understood that a single rash action could inflame public sentiment, and he wanted to prevent that. Meanwhile, the city's residents reacted strongly. People on the streets discussed the incident as they went about their day, sharing opinions and expressing disbelief. Some were angry, questioning how a police officer could strike anyone without reason, let alone someone of such importance. Others focused on the mayor's response, admiring his ability to remain calm under pressure. The mixture of outrage and respect created a charged atmosphere throughout the city, and conversations about accountability, authority, and justice began to dominate public discourse. Local media arrived at the scene, interviewing witnesses and capturing the reactions of people who had been nearby. Many described how shocked they were to realize that the quiet man struck by the officer was the mayor. Some recounted the way he had stood without anger, how he had addressed the officer with clarity, and how his composure had influenced the crowd. Each story emphasized the contrast between the officer's rashness and the mayor's calm authority, highlighting the unusual nature of the event. Back on the sidewalk, investigators arrived to document the incident. They collected statements from witnesses, examined security footage from nearby stores, and took photographs of the scene. The presence of law enforcement officials, this time with cameras and notepads, added a new layer of seriousness. They worked efficiently, understanding that the event had the potential to escalate into something far larger if mishandled. The mayor observed quietly, ensuring that the investigation was transparent and that the truth of the incident would be clear. As the initial shock began to fade, conversations across the city began to focus on the larger implications. Community leaders and activists commented on the situation, expressing concern over policing practices and the treatment of citizens. They praised the mayor for handling the incident with dignity, noting that his reaction had prevented immediate conflict. Meetings were called to discuss potential reforms, and questions about training, oversight, and accountability were raised. The incident had become more than a local news story. It was now a catalyst for public discussion and reflection. The officer, meanwhile, faced intense scrutiny. His actions were reviewed by internal affairs, his training records examined, and interviews conducted to understand why he had acted as he did. He realized that every detail of the encounter would be analyzed, and that his future as a law enforcement officer depended on the results of these reviews. He felt the weight of public opinion pressing down on him, the knowledge that the mistake was not only visible but unforgettable in the minds of thousands. Throughout the city, people began to see the quiet man in a new light. Those who had walked past him without notice now recognized his importance, and the realization that he had been struck without cause heightened admiration for his character. He became a symbol of calm strength, a person capable of maintaining dignity even in the face of unexpected violence. People discussed how unusual it was to witness someone react with patience and authority, rather than fear or anger, and this inspired conversations about leadership and human decency. As the day progressed, the mayor addressed the public through official channels. He made a statement acknowledging the incident, emphasizing the importance of transparency, fairness, and accountability. He spoke about the need for dialogue between citizens and law enforcement, advocating for reforms that would prevent similar mistakes in the future. His words were measured, clear, and compassionate, resonating with a wide audience. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, as people appreciated his focus on constructive solutions rather than retaliation or blame. Meanwhile, the officer was placed on temporary administrative leave while the investigation continued. He attended meetings with superiors, legal advisors, and psychologists, discussing what had occurred and how such mistakes could be prevented in the future. The process was thorough, aimed at understanding the factors that led to the incident and ensuring that accountability would be maintained. The officer began to reflect deeply on his actions, the assumptions he had made, and the consequences of allowing fear to dictate behavior. Community meetings were organized to discuss the event and its implications. Residents, activists, and local leaders came together to share perspectives, explore solutions, and voice concerns. Many spoke about the importance of training, empathy, and communication, while others reflected on the mayor's example of calm leadership. The discussion was energetic but respectful, with participants acknowledging the complexity of the situation and the need for systemic change. It became clear that the incident was more than a single event. It was a lesson for the city about authority, responsibility, and human interaction. The mayor continued to meet with staff, advisors, and law enforcement leaders. He emphasized the importance of handling the investigation openly, ensuring that the public could see that justice would be served. His approach was methodical, focused on clarity and transparency. He knew that the trust of the community depended not only on the resolution of the incident, but also on the perception of fairness and accountability. Every decision was guided by the principles of leadership, integrity, and respect for the public. As the days passed, the story remained at the forefront of public conversation. People shared their experiences, opinions, and lessons learned from the incident. Social media posts continued to circulate, highlighting both the officer's mistake and the mayor's remarkable response. Commentators discussed the importance of calm authority, the dangers of rash action, and the ways in which a single event could spark citywide reflection. The mayor's response became a case study in leadership under pressure, admired by many for its balance of patience, dignity, and firmness. The incident also sparked discussions in schools, workplaces, and community centers. Educators used it as an example to teach about human behavior, conflict resolution, and responsible authority. Community groups held forums to discuss bias, communication, and accountability. The city collectively reflected on the lessons of the day, using the incident to foster understanding and encourage positive change. The officer, grappling with guilt and responsibility, began participating in training sessions focused on bias awareness, de-escalation techniques, and community engagement. These sessions were designed to help him understand how assumptions and fear could lead to mistakes, and how to prevent such errors in the future. While the process was difficult, it was also an opportunity for growth, reflection, and a chance to rebuild trust with the community. Meanwhile, the mayor continued to fulfill his responsibilities, balancing the demands of leadership with the attention the incident had brought. He met with community leaders, law enforcement officials, and city staff to discuss policy improvements, training reforms, and ways to strengthen the relationship between the police and the public. His calm, thoughtful approach reassured citizens, demonstrating that leadership was not about reacting impulsively but about guiding, understanding, and inspiring others. The quiet man, once unnoticed on the sidewalk, had become a symbol for the city. His response to the unexpected strike showcased the power of calm authority, patience, and composure. Citizens reflected on the importance of dignity in the face of adversity, recognizing that leadership often emerges in moments of crisis. The incident, initially frightening and chaotic, had transformed into a powerful lesson for the community. In the weeks following the incident, public discourse continued to focus on lessons learned. People discussed the importance of empathy, careful observation, and responsible action. Workshops, town halls, and media discussions emphasized the need to think before acting, to question assumptions, and to respect every individual. The mayor's leadership during the event became an example for city officials, educators, and citizens alike, illustrating how calm, thoughtful responses could turn a tense moment into a constructive opportunity for change. Throughout this period, the officer's reflection deepened. He began to understand the ripple effects of his actions, not just for the mayor or himself, but for the community at large. Each conversation, each training session, each meeting reinforced the investigation into the incident on the sidewalk intensified quickly. Internal affairs officers arrived to review the event thoroughly. They collected all the video footage from nearby stores and bystanders, examined the officer's body camera, and interviewed everyone who had witnessed the interaction. Each detail was carefully noted, from the angle of the strike to the words spoken immediately after. The city demanded transparency, and officials understood that any misstep in the investigation could lead to public outrage. The officer was placed on administrative leave during this process, giving authorities the time to handle the matter with proper attention. The mayor, despite the sudden attack, continued to focus on fairness and accountability. He met with law enforcement leaders and city officials to ensure the investigation would be unbiased and thorough. He emphasized the importance of clarity, insisting that the facts be recorded accurately and the public kept informed. The mayor understood that anger could easily take over in a situation like this, but he believed that maintaining calm and encouraging justice would benefit the community more than immediate reaction. Witnesses returned statements to the authorities, describing not only the moment of the strike, but also the mayor's response. They spoke about his composure, how he spoke calmly to the officer, and how he handled the crowd that had gathered. Many mentioned the shock and tension in the street, and how the mayor's presence had helped prevent escalation. The consistent theme in the statements was admiration for the quiet strength he displayed and the fairness he demonstrated despite the unexpected attack. The officer met with investigators, providing his account of the event. He admitted to acting hastily and acknowledged that he had misjudged the situation. He described the fear and stress that led to his actions and how he did not anticipate hitting someone of such importance. The interview was intense and sobering, giving him the opportunity to reflect deeply on the consequences of assumptions, stress, and poor judgment. It became clear that training, awareness, and personal responsibility were central to preventing future incidents. At the same time, city leaders held meetings to discuss the wider implications. They examined policies and protocols, evaluating whether adjustments were needed to prevent similar mistakes. The conversation included the role of body cameras, the importance of de-escalation training, and the ways in which officers assess situations under stress. Citizens and advocacy groups were invited to participate, creating a dialogue between the community and law enforcement. The mayor emphasized that reform must be proactive and inclusive, rather than reactive and superficial. Media coverage of the investigation remained intense. Journalists reported on the mayor's involvement, the officer's response, and the collection of evidence. The public closely followed updates discussing the event at work, in schools, and at home. Social media continued to circulate video clips and commentary, reinforcing the lessons about calm leadership, the dangers of rash action, and the importance of accountability. The story became a symbol, illustrating both human error and the potential for measured response to transform a tense situation. During this period, the mayor continued his routine duties, balancing the demands of governance with the attention the incident had brought. He met with staff, attended briefings, and engaged with community members, always maintaining composure and ensuring that the public could trust the process. The mayor's example of handling a difficult situation with patience and fairness inspired others to follow his lead. City employees noted how his focus on transparency and respect for the law created a positive ripple effect throughout the government. Community leaders took note of the incident and the mayor's response, organizing forums to discuss lessons learned. People reflected on how authority should be exercised, how assumptions can lead to mistakes, and how calm, patient leadership can prevent escalation. These meetings fostered understanding and encouraged collaboration between citizens and law enforcement. The mayor actively participated in these discussions, highlighting the importance of communication, empathy, and awareness in maintaining trust and safety in the community. The officer faced additional meetings and training sessions focused on improving judgment and interaction with the public. These sessions emphasized understanding human behavior, recognizing potential biases, and employing nonviolent conflict resolution. The goal was not just to punish but to educate, ensuring that mistakes would not be repeated. The officer began to internalize these lessons, reflecting on his actions and recognizing the profound impact a moment of poor judgment could have on individuals, the community, and his career. As the investigation continued, the mayor made public statements to assure citizens that the city was handling the matter responsibly. He emphasized that transparency and accountability were paramount and encouraged the public to trust the process. His words were measured and thoughtful, reinforcing the idea that justice and fairness were more important than anger or retaliation. The public's response was positive, with many praising the mayor for his leadership and ability to guide the city through a potentially volatile situation. The investigation ultimately determined that the officer's action was unjustified and preventable. While the officer had not intended to cause harm, his lack of judgment and failure to properly assess the situation were clear. Disciplinary actions were proposed, and training requirements were reinforced to prevent similar incidents in the future. The findings were shared publicly, demonstrating the city's commitment to accountability and transparency. Citizens appreciated that the process was thorough and fair, and the incident became a teaching moment for both law enforcement and the community. Throughout this process, the mayor maintained contact with the quiet man he had been that day on the sidewalk. He expressed gratitude for his patience and composure, recognizing that the public's perception of the event was shaped by the calm and dignity displayed. The quiet man's experience became a symbol of the power of self-control and the impact of one individual's ability to rise above sudden aggression. Their interaction reminded everyone that respect, fairness, and understanding could turn a moment of conflict into an opportunity for growth and reflection. Community workshops were organized to discuss bias, judgment, and the human elements that influence decisions in high-pressure situations. Police officers, city officials, and citizens attended these workshops, engaging in conversations about empathy, awareness, and responsibility. The mayor personally participated, illustrating his commitment to constructive dialogue and the importance of learning from mistakes. The workshops were well received, encouraging a culture of understanding and mutual respect. Over time, the city began implementing reforms inspired by the incident. New training programs for officers focused on nonviolent conflict resolution, careful observation, and clear communication. Policies were updated to emphasize accountability and transparency, ensuring that similar incidents would be handled more effectively in the future. The mayor's leadership during this process became a model for how to navigate crises with patience, fairness, and a focus on positive change. The officer, having undergone reflection and training, emerged with a renewed understanding of responsibility. He recognized that every action carries consequences, and that maintaining composure is essential in positions of authority. His experience became a personal turning point, shaping his approach to law enforcement and human interaction. The lessons learned from the incident would guide his future behavior, creating a cautious but wiser approach to his duties. As the city settled into a new rhythm, citizens continued to discuss the sidewalk incident as an example of leadership, accountability, and personal growth. Schools, community centers, and workplaces used the story to teach about empathy, careful decision-making, and the importance of human dignity. The mayor's actions and the resulting reforms demonstrated that even a moment of conflict could lead to constructive outcomes when handled with care and integrity. In the end, the incident became more than a mistake. It became a story of reflection, reform, and the impact of calm, human-centered leadership. The mayor's composure, the quiet man's patience, and the officer's eventual accountability combined to create a narrative that inspired the city to focus on fairness, awareness, and growth. What started as a sudden strike on a sidewalk turned into a lesson for an entire community about the power of presence, responsibility, and dignity in the face of unexpected challenges.